What a person orders for their last meal tells you more about who they were than any confession ever did. Number 12 on this list was a single piece of food, and the man who ordered it asked that a tree of peace be grown from it. Number 10 was a feast so enormous, so deliberately wasteful, it ended the entire tradition in Texas overnight. And number 1 was ordered by a man who once managed the very restaurant he ate from, a detail most people refuse to believe is true. Before we start, hit that subscribe button, because what these final plates reveal about the human mind, you will not be able to forget. Let us count down. Number 25, Burton Abbott. In 1955, Burton Abbott was convicted of the kidnapping and murder of a 14-year-old girl in California, a case that gripped the entire country through a televised trial. When his appeals ran out in 1957, he was taken to the gas chamber at San Quentin. His final request was almost elegant in its restraint for the era. French-fried butterfly prawns with cocktail sauce, a single order of ravioli, a tossed green salad, mostly romaine, dressed with oil and vinegar, a slice of chocolate cake, and a pack of Salem cigarettes. This was the 1950s, when a man could still smoke in a death cell, and the cigarettes were as much a part of the ritual as the food. The grim footnote to Abbott's story is timing. The governor's office tried to call the prison with a stay of execution, while the gas pellets were already dropping. The phone reached the warden too late. Abbott had eaten his prawns and his cake hours before, never knowing how close that telephone came to saving him. Number 24, Wanda Jean Allen. Some people, facing the end, want nothing elaborate at all. Wanda Jean Allen was executed in Oklahoma in 2001 for shooting and killing her partner, a case that drew national attention because of questions about her intellectual disability and the fairness of her trial. When the time came to choose a final meal, the woman whose case had become a cause for activists across the country asked for one thing: a single bag of potato chips. That was it. No steak, no dessert, no last indulgence. A bag of chips eaten in a cell. There is something almost unbearably small about it. A reminder that for some people on death row, the appetite simply goes. The body knows what is coming even when the mind tries to pretend otherwise. And a person who once might have wanted a feast finds that all they can manage is something they could buy from a vending machine. Number 23, Thomas Provenzano. He was executed in Florida in 2000 for a shooting at an Orange County courthouse that killed a bailiff. He suffered from severe mental illness, and his case became a long legal battle over whether a man with documented delusions could be put to death. His final meal was the kind of plate you might give a sick child: half a grilled cheese sandwich, a small portion of baked beans, hot canned apples, the kind that come swimming in cinnamon syrup, 2 slices of plain bread, and a cup of tea. There is no defiance in a meal like that, no statement, no last grand gesture. It reads like comfort food, the food of someone who wanted, in his final hours, to feel like he was somewhere safe and ordinary instead of strapped to a gurney. Half a sandwich, not even a whole one. Number 22, Richard Henyard. Richard Henyard was executed in Florida in 2008 for a brutal crime that took the lives of 2 young children. His final meal stands out precisely because it was so generous, so much like a real dinner a person might order on a good night out. 2 fried chicken breasts, turkey sausage, a plate of fried rice, chocolate chip cookies, and a Coca-Cola. It was a comforting, almost cheerful spread, the food of celebration rather than mourning. And that is the unsettling thing about so many of these meals. The plate itself carries no memory of what the person did. The chicken does not know. The cookies do not know. A condemned man can sit down to the same dinner a family might share on a Friday, and the contrast between the meal and the crime is its own kind of horror. Number 21, Mark Dean Schwab. He was executed in Florida in 2008 for the abduction and murder of an 11-year-old boy. When asked what he wanted for his last meal, Schwab did not ask for dinner at all. He asked for breakfast: 2 fried eggs, 4 strips of bacon, 2 sausage links, buttered toast, a pile of hash browns, and a full quart of chocolate milk. It is the meal of a man who wanted to feel like he was waking up to an ordinary morning, the kind you might eat at a diner counter before a long drive. There is a strange psychology in choosing breakfast as your final meal, a refusal to acknowledge that there will be no tomorrow morning to eat it again. The quart of chocolate milk in particular reads like something a child would order, a final reach backward toward a time before everything went wrong. First pattern break. Here is where the ritual itself gets interesting. The last meal is not a law. No statute requires it. It grew up as a custom, a piece of folk tradition that prison systems adopted because it felt humane, and because it gave the condemned one small thing to control on a day when everything else was decided for them. Different states handle it differently. Florida caps the cost at around $40 and requires that everything be bought locally, which is why you never see a condemned man in Florida order something exotic. The food has to come from a grocery store or a fast food restaurant within driving distance of the prison. Texas, for nearly a century, granted almost any request within reason. The meals are prepared by prison kitchen staff, sometimes the same cooks who feed the general population, and served on the same plastic trays. There are no candles, no tablecloths, and there is one rule that surprises people: no alcohol, which is why the few stories of condemned men drinking on their final night always involve something smuggled in, a detail that brings us to number 19. But first, 4 more plates. Number 20, Teresa Lewis. Teresa Lewis was executed in Virginia in 2010, the first woman put to death in that state in nearly a century. She was convicted of orchestrating the murders of her husband and stepson in a plot for insurance money, and her case was deeply controversial because of her low-measured IQ. Her final meal was hearty and home-style, the food of a Sunday dinner: 2 pieces of fried chicken, a serving of sweet peas dripping with butter, a slice of rich German chocolate cake with its coconut pecan frosting, and a Dr. Pepper to wash it down. Number 17, meatloaf with tomato glaze and green beans. It is a Southern comfort plate through and through, the kind of meal that says home more than it says farewell. The German chocolate cake in particular is a celebration dessert, something you bake for a birthday. And there is a quiet sadness in a woman ordering a birthday cake for the last supper of her life. Number 19, Gary Gilmore. Gary Gilmore made history in 1977 as the first person executed in the United States after the death penalty was reinstated. And he did it by demanding to die, famously telling the court, "Let's do it." He chose a firing squad in Utah. His final meal was simple and all-American: a hamburger, eggs, a baked potato, and coffee. But here is the part that became legend. Gilmore also drank whiskey on his final night, contraband smuggled in by an uncle, because no prison would ever serve alcohol as part of a last meal. He ate little of the actual food. The man who fought for his own execution, who turned his death into a media spectacle that inspired books and songs, spent his final hours with a burger he barely touched and a bottle he was never supposed to have. Number 18, Carla Faye Tucker. Carla Faye Tucker was executed in Texas in 1998 for a pickaxe murder, the first woman executed in that state since the Civil War. Her case became an international sensation because of a religious conversion on death row that won her supporters as unlikely as televangelists and the Pope. And yet, given the chance at the famously generous Texas last meal, where men ordered mountains of barbecue and steak, Tucker asked for almost nothing: a banana, a peach, and a simple garden salad with ranch dressing. It was the meal of someone who had, by her own account, made peace with what was coming. No final feast, no indulgence, just fruit and a little salad, light enough that it could not weigh her down. In a state where the last meal could be a glutton's dream, she chose the breakfast of someone trying to stay calm. Number 17. Judías Buenoano. Judías Buenoano earned the nickname the Black Widow for a string of poisonings and a drowning that killed her husband and her own son, and nearly took her fiancé, schemes designed to collect insurance payouts. She was executed in Florida in 1998. Her final meal is one of the most darkly ironic on this entire list. Steamed broccoli, asparagus, fresh strawberries, sliced tomatoes, and a cup of hot tea. It reads like a spa menu, a health-conscious, almost virtuous plate of vegetables and fruit, ordered by a woman who spent years feeding poison to the people who trusted her most. The contrast is almost too perfect. The Black Widow, who turned food and drink into weapons, asked for the cleanest, healthiest meal imaginable as her own final act. Whatever she was thinking, the plate she chose said something her words never did. Number 16. Odell Barnes Jr. Odell Barnes Jr. was executed in Texas in 2000, and his case became a rallying point for death penalty opponents around the world who raised serious doubts about the evidence used to convict him. When the prison asked what he wanted for his final meal, Barnes refused to play along with the ritual at all. He did not ask for food. He asked for justice, equality, and world peace. It was a final act of protest, a way of turning the most personal moment of the entire process into a political statement broadcast to anyone who would listen. The prison could not serve him justice on a tray. They could not plate up equality. And so a man went to his death, having ordered something no kitchen on earth could prepare, leaving behind a request that said everything about how he wanted to be remembered. Second pattern break. Here is what these meals actually reveal, and it is not what you would expect. Psychologists who study the last meal phenomenon have noticed something striking. The choices fall into patterns that have almost nothing to do with the severity of the crime. Some condemned people order enormous feasts they cannot possibly finish, and researchers believe this is about control, a way of commanding abundance on a day when they have no power over anything else. Others order the food of childhood, the grilled cheese and the chocolate milk and the canned apples, reaching back toward the last time they felt safe. A surprising number refuse food entirely, and many of those are people who have, in some way, accepted their fate or detached from their own bodies. And then there is the single most common dessert across every state and every decade: ice cream. By far, roughly 4 out of 5 people who request a dessert ask for some version of it. Cold, sweet, simple, and gone in minutes. The food we associate more than any other with being a small child on a summer afternoon. The men and women on this list committed some of the worst acts imaginable, and most of them, at the end, wanted ice cream. Number 15. Philip Workman. Philip Workman was executed in Tennessee in 2007 for the killing of a police officer during a robbery, a conviction surrounded by lingering questions about the forensic evidence. When asked for his final meal, Workman refused to eat anything for himself. Instead, he made a request that turned into one of the most remarkable stories in the history of the last meal. He asked that a large vegetarian pizza be donated to a homeless person in Nashville. The prison refused, saying it was not their job to fulfill charitable requests. But word got out, and across the country, ordinary people who heard what Workman had asked for began ordering pizzas for homeless shelters in his name. Donations poured into food banks in Nashville and far beyond. A condemned man's final wish, denied by the state, was answered 100 times over by strangers. It remains the only last meal request in American history that fed more people than the man himself ever could have eaten while alive. Number 14. Jonathan Nobles. Jonathan Nobles was executed in Texas in 1998 for a double murder committed during a drug-fueled break-in. On death row, he underwent a religious conversion, and when the time came for his final meal, he did something almost no one else has done. He declined food altogether and asked instead to receive the Eucharist, the communion bread and wine of the Catholic faith. His spiritual advisor administered it to him. For Nobles, the last meal was not about appetite or comfort or defiance. It was a sacrament. He sang Silent Night as the lethal injection began. The man chose, for his final nourishment, a wafer and a sip meant to represent something far larger than food, and in doing so he turned the prison's grim ritual into a religious one, the last meal becoming a last rite. Number 13. Robert Buell. Robert Buell was executed in Ohio in 2002, convicted in the murder of a young girl. His final meal is one of the most quietly chilling on this list precisely because of its restraint. He asked for a single black olive, unpitted, one olive sitting alone on a prison tray. There is no record of exactly what he meant by it, and that absence is part of what makes it unforgettable. A feast is easy to understand. Hunger and indulgence make sense. But a single olive is a riddle, a gesture without explanation, and we are left to fill the silence ourselves. Some read it as a final dark joke, others as a statement of contempt for the whole ritual. Whatever it meant to him, the image lingers. The last thing a man chose to taste on this earth was one bitter olive, the pit still inside. Number 12. Victor Feger. The olive returns, and this time we know exactly what it meant. Victor Feger was the last person executed by the federal government before a long pause in federal executions. He was hanged in Iowa in 1963 for kidnapping and killing a doctor. For his final meal, Feger asked for a single olive with the pit left in. He explained why. He hoped that the pit would be buried with him and that from it an olive tree might one day grow. The olive branch is the ancient symbol of peace. It was a wish for something good to come out of his death, a small green shoot rising from the place where he was laid. Reports say the pit was indeed found in the pocket of his suit after he was hanged. No tree ever grew, but the gesture survives more than 60 years later as the gentlest and most poetic request in the entire grim history of the American last meal. Number 11. Ricky Ray Rector. Ricky Ray Rector was executed in Arkansas in 1992, and his case is among the most disturbing on this list, not for the meal, but for what the meal revealed. Rector had shot himself in the head after his crime, an injury that effectively gave him a lobotomy and left him severely cognitively impaired. For his final meal, he ordered steak, fried chicken, and cherry Kool-Aid with a slice of pecan pie for dessert. He ate the steak and the chicken, but he did not touch the pie. When the guards came to take him to the death chamber, Rector told them he was saving his pecan pie for later. He did not understand even then that there would be no later. That single sentence became one of the most cited moments in the entire debate over executing the mentally impaired in America. A man so damaged he set aside his dessert for a tomorrow that everyone but him knew would never come. Third pattern break. Here is the meal that ended a tradition. For decades, Texas was famous for the generosity of its last meals, granting nearly any request within reason. Then came number 10. In 2011, a man named Lawrence Russell Brewer, convicted in one of the most notorious hate crime murders in modern American history, ordered a final meal of staggering size. 2 chicken fried steaks smothered in gravy, a triple meat bacon cheeseburger, a bowl of fried okra, a full pound of barbecue, 3 fajitas, a meat lover's pizza, a pint of ice cream, and a slab of peanut butter fudge studded with crushed peanuts. The prison kitchen made all of it. And then Brewer announced he was not hungry and refused to eat a single bite. a Texas state senator was so enraged by the waste and the disrespect that he demanded the policy end immediately. The very next day, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice abolished the special last meal entirely. From that point forward, condemned inmates in the busiest execution state in America would receive only the same tray served to everyone else. One man's uneaten feast erased a tradition that had stood for almost 90 years. Number 10. Lawrence Russell Brewer. We covered the meal in the pattern break, but the man deserves his place on the list because his choice was not really about food at all. Brewer was sent to death row for a 1998 murder in Jasper, Texas. So brutal and so racially motivated that it shocked the nation and helped inspire new hate crime legislation. His mountainous final order, deliberately wasteful and then deliberately untouched, reads now like a final act of contempt aimed at the entire system. He took the one freedom the state offered him, the freedom to choose a meal, and used it to mock the gesture. The pile of food sat there cooling on the tray. He was executed without having eaten any of it. And because of him, no one in Texas would ever be offered that choice again. It may be the only last meal in history whose main effect was to take last meals away from everyone who came after. Number 9. Timothy McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh was not a serial killer in the technical sense. He was a domestic terrorist executed by the federal government in 2001 for the Oklahoma City bombing that killed 168 people, including 19 children in a daycare on the building's lower floors. It remains one of the deadliest acts of terrorism on American soil. And his final meal, given the scale of what he did, is jarring in its smallness and its innocence. McVeigh asked for 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream. That was all. No steak, no symbolic statement, no feast. Just ice cream, the dessert of a child's birthday party, chosen by a man responsible for one of the worst mass murders in the country's history. The simplicity of it has haunted people ever since. 2 pints of green ice cream, eaten in a federal cell by a man who showed no remorse for the lives he ended. Number 8. Alan Lee Davis. Alan Lee Davis was executed in Florida's electric chair in 1999 for the murder of a pregnant woman and her 2 young daughters. Davis was a very large man, and his final meal matched his size. 1 lobster tail, a heaping plate of fried potatoes, a half pound of fried shrimp, 6 ounces of fried clams, half a loaf of garlic bread, and a full quart of A&W root beer. It was a seafood feast that would strain the $40 Florida cap, an enormous spread of fried everything washed down with cold root beer. His execution became infamous for other reasons, sparking a legal fight over whether Florida's electric chair was a cruel and unusual method, a controversy that ultimately pushed the state toward lethal injection. But the meal endures in the records as one of the largest a Florida inmate ever managed to order before the limits tightened. Number 7. Ronnie Lee Gardner. He was executed in Utah in 2010, and he made a choice almost no one in the modern era makes. He chose to die by firing squad, one of the last men in America to do so. His final meal was a steakhouse plate fit for a celebration. Steak, lobster tail, apple pie, and vanilla ice cream with 7-Up to drink. But the truly unusual part was how he spent his final 2 days. Gardner asked to watch the entire Lord of the Rings film trilogy, more than 9 hours of movies, while he waited for the end. He ate his steak and lobster, watched hobbits march toward Mordor, and then walked to a chair where 5 marksmen waited behind a wall with rifles. It is one of the few last meals paired with a last movie marathon. A man choosing to spend his final hours not in prayer or protest, but in front of a screen, escaping into a story until the very last moment. Number 6. Velma Barfield. Velma Barfield holds a grim place in history as the first woman executed in the United States, after the death penalty was reinstated in the 1970s. She was put to death in North Carolina in 1984. A grandmother who became known as the Death Row Granny, she had poisoned several people with arsenic, including her own fiancé, often disguising the poison in their food and drink. And so her final meal is almost unbearably ironic. This woman who used food as a murder weapon, who turned ordinary meals into instruments of death, asked at the end for the simplest, most innocent snack imaginable: a bag of cheese doodles and a can of Coca-Cola. Junk food, the kind of thing you eat on a couch in front of the television. The poisoner who hid death in home-cooked meals went out with a fistful of cheese puffs and a soda, refusing any kind of feast, choosing instead the food of a quiet, ordinary afternoon. Fourth pattern break. Here is something the public rarely considers. These meals have become a form of dark entertainment, and an entire small industry has grown up around them. A photographer once recreated famous last meals as a fine art series, plating Gacy's fried chicken and McVeigh's ice cream, and Faguer's lonely olive as if they were dishes in a magazine. There are cookbooks built around them. There are websites that catalog them in obsessive detail. And recently, a true crime-themed restaurant opened that serves replicas of these exact meals on prison-style cafeteria trays, naming dishes after the killers who ordered them, a concept that sparked national outrage and just as much fascination. People are drawn to these plates because they collapse the distance between the monstrous and the mundane. We cannot imagine committing these crimes, but we can all imagine ordering a cheeseburger, or craving ice cream, or wanting a quiet bag of chips. The last meal makes a monster briefly, uncomfortably human, and that flicker of recognition is exactly what we cannot look away from. Number 5. Danny Rolling. Danny Rolling, known as the Gainesville Ripper, terrorized a Florida college town in 1990 with a series of murders so frightening that students fled campus in droves. He was executed in Florida in 2006. His final meal was a seafood feast, almost identical in spirit to the elaborate spreads other Florida inmates ordered before the rules tightened. A buttered lobster tail, butterflied shrimp, a baked potato, a slice of strawberry cheesecake for dessert, and sweet tea to drink. Rolling, who had once aspired to be a musician, offered no spoken final statement. Instead, he sang a gospel hymn delivered in the death chamber in the moments before the injection began. A man who had brought unimaginable terror to a community spent his last meal on lobster and cheesecake, and his last breath on a hymn, a contrast so stark it left the witnesses unsettled for years afterward. Number 4. William Bonin. William Bonin was the freeway killer, executed in California in 1996 for the murders of more than a dozen young men and boys whose bodies were left along the highways of Southern California. He was the first person in California ever executed by lethal injection, and his final meal was a quantity that reads less like a Last Supper and more like a party order for a crowd. 2 large pepperoni and sausage pizzas, 3 pints of coffee ice cream, and 3 6-packs of regular Coca-Cola. It is an astonishing amount of food and caffeine and sugar for one man on his final night, an order built for a group, consumed by someone facing the end alone. The coffee ice cream is an unusual touch, an adult flavor amid the pizza and the soda. Bonin used his actual final words not to apologize, but to argue that the death penalty sends the wrong message to young people. A chilling statement from a man who preyed on the young, eaten into the record alongside an order of 3 pizzas worth of indulgence. Number 3. Eileen Wuornos. Eileen Wuornos is one of the most infamous women in American criminal history, a former sex worker convicted of killing 6 men in Florida, her story later told in an Oscar-winning film. She was executed by lethal injection in 2002, and in the end, the woman whose life had been a study in chaos and rage refused the entire ritual. She declined a special last meal altogether, All she asked for was a single cup of black coffee, which she drank hours before she died. No food, no feast, no comfort, just coffee. Her final spoken words were as strange as her refusal of food, a rambling declaration that she would be back, like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6, a reference to a science fiction movie about an alien invasion. She believed she was sailing away on a mothership, a cup of black coffee and a promise to return from the stars. She has not turned up yet. Number 2, Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy is, for many Americans, the definition of the word serial killer. Charming, articulate, and utterly remorseless, he confessed to 30 murders of young women before his execution, though the true number is believed to be far higher. He died in Florida's electric chair in 1989 as crowds gathered outside the prison, some celebrating, some protesting, and his last meal is famous precisely because of what did not happen. Bundy declined to request anything special, so the prison gave him the standard fare offered to any condemned inmate who makes no choice. A medium rare steak, eggs over easy, hash browns, buttered toast with jelly, milk, coffee, and juice. A perfectly ordinary American breakfast for dinner. And Bundy, the man who controlled and manipulated everything and everyone around him to the very end, did not eat a single bite. The plate sat untouched. The most calculating killer in modern American history offered one last small thing to control, simply refused it, and walked to the chair on an empty stomach. Number 1, John Wayne Gacy. And here is the meal so darkly fitting that people refuse to believe it. John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown, murdered at least 33 young men and boys in the 1970s and buried most of them beneath his own house, all while performing as a clown at children's parties and posing for photographs with the First Lady. He was executed by lethal injection in Illinois in 1994. For his final meal, Gacy ordered a feast, a bucket of original recipe Kentucky Fried Chicken, a dozen fried shrimp, a pile of French fries, a full pound of fresh strawberries, and a Diet Coke. The fried chicken is the detail that makes it unforgettable, because before he became one of the most notorious murderers in American history, John Wayne Gacy had managed Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants. He knew that food from the inside. He had cooked it, sold it, run the registers. And on the last night of his life, the man who hid bodies beneath his floorboards reached back to the one period when he could pass for normal, when he was just a fast food manager in a paper hat and ordered a bucket of the chicken he once served to the public. He ate it in a cell. Whether it actually came from a real KFC, no one ever confirmed it. But the order stands as the most quietly horrifying last meal on this entire list. A killer's final taste of the ordinary life he wore as a mask. Number 17, meatloaf with tomato glaze and green beans. Here is my question for you. Of all 25, which one stuck with you? The single olive and the tree that never grew. The grandmother and her bag of cheese puffs. The terrorist and his 2 pints of ice cream. Or the clown who ordered the chicken he used to sell. Drop the number in the comments and tell me why, because I want to know if the empty plate haunts you more than the feast. These were not just meals. They were the last honest thing these people ever did. A final choice that said more than any words could. And once you have seen them, you cannot unsee what they reveal.